Erstmals in der Geschichte der Raumfahrt ist es gelungen, auf einem Kometen zu landen.
It's a mission more than a decade in the making.
After 10 years of planning, the European Space Agency has landed a spacecraft on a comet.
What may sound like science fiction is now science reality.
A moment of triumph and celebration.
Been waiting all afternoon. This was the reaction from the scientists.
5 de la tarde hora española. Los científicos de la Agencia Espacial Europea celebran en su sede de Alemania que Philae.
Ce sont des images en direct de l'Allemagne, de la salle de contrôle où visiblement.
Es ist eine Premiere bei der Erforschung des Weltalls, ein Meilenstein für die Raumfahrt. Manche Experten vergleichen es bereits mit der Mondlandung.
Europa schrijft ruimtevaartgeschiedenis.
Per la prima volta una sonda atterra su una cometa, storico successo dell'Agenzia Spaziale Europea.
How difficult is this? I mean, everything, even Earth is moving in space. How hard is this to do?
Well, Emily, the difficulty of this cannot be overstated.
How audacious, how exciting, how unbelievable to be able to dare to land on a comet.
Over 10 years had passed since Rosetta and Philae launched on their exciting mission to Comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko. After 3 months investigating the comet from orbit, it was time to send Philae to its surface. A long night of final preparations lay ahead of them. Finally, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. As the world held its breath, Rosetta moved into the exact position needed to make sure Philae would reach the landing site that scientists on Earth had picked earlier in the mission. Philae and Rosetta were sad to be going their separate ways, but excited at the same time, because this is what they had been waiting to do. Philae was away. It would take 7 hours to reach the surface, but Philae wanted to get started on his measurements right away. He could soon see the surface in incredible detail, and the moment he had been dreaming of had finally arrived. He had reached the surface of the comet. But all was not right. His harpoons did not fire. Philae realized he couldn't relax yet. He was rising from the surface again. Philae was scared he might drift off the comet completely. This was not in the plan. But eventually, he came back down again. However, as he looked around, he realized he had landed in a completely unexpected location. Philae immediately set to work on studying his new home. It took him just over 2 days to conduct all the experiments he had brought with him. After all his hard work, Philae began to feel tired, so he made sure to send all the data he had collected back to Rosetta. As the sun set over Philae's new home, he fell into a deep sleep, safe in the knowledge that he did his main job well, and that his family of comet-chasing heroes would be proud of his achievement. Who knows, perhaps one day enough sunlight would fall on his new landing site and wake him up so that he could carry on investigating this incredible world. And so, as the comet moved over closer to the sun, Rosetta prepared for the next part of her exciting adventure.
Hello. Thank you very much for being here this morning. and welcome to, thanks also to Matthias for introducing us. And I will do so in a little bit more detail right now. So welcome to Rosetta 1 Kardashian 0. What we would like to discuss also with you in this coming hour is actually what the two videos showed. What has happened with Rosetta, what will still happen, because the mission is far from being over. But first, and even more important, I would like to introduce you to the splendid team we have on stage here. And I would like to begin with Emily Baldwin. She is a space science editor and writer for ESA, for the European Space Agency, and for the ESTEC establishment, which is based in the Netherlands. And Emily is an important part of the team behind the social media campaign of the Rosetta mission. And she is, in particular, she's the voice behind ESA Rosetta. I'm not sure if you thought that the space probe was tweeting by itself. Maybe it is, we will clarify later. But Emily is at least the helping hand, or even more, we'll see. Well, besides, Emily is also in charge of the blog and writing about other ESA space science missions. The second lady on stage is Karin Ranero. She is, I forgot, Emily is of British nationality, European of British nationality. Karin is European and of Spanish and Norwegian nationality. And she is space science editor and writer for DLR. DLR is the German Space Agency and a research center for aeronautics and space here in Germany. And Karin, in fact, is the voice behind Philae 2014. We'll see also if Philae 2014 has artificial intelligence and can tweet by itself, or if maybe Karin is helping with that. And in principle, Karin and Emily, they are the ones behind the social media campaign and the conversation of the two spacecraft. Next to me is Andrea Accomazzo. Andrea is a European of Italian nationality, and he is since 2013 the head of the Solar and Planetary Missions Division at ESA's ESOC establishment, which is based here in Germany, in Darmstadt. And this played, as you will learn during this session, it played a vital role with regard to the mission. And Andrea served as and still is the flight director for Rosetta and the ground segment manager for many other ESA space missions. Andrea joined ESA already in 1999 as a Rosetta operations engineer, so he is with the mission for a really long time. Last not least is Koen Geurts. He is a European of Dutch nationality, and since 2011 he's the Rosetta Länder, the Rosetta Philae Länder technical manager, also for DLR, the German Aerospace Center, and joined the team in 2008. Koen, in fact, was the one who was at the Lander Control Center of Philae, which we saw depicted in the video. He, at the LCC in Cologne, he had a lead role with the Lander operations. So, myself, I have been introduced already by Matthias. Thanks for that. I'm also European of German and Italian nationality, and I work for ESA's communication department. Okay, now coming to the story of Rosetta. As you could see, the video already gave quite a bit of introductory information on the Rosetta mission, but of course I would love to pass on to the experts, and first to Andrea to give us some more details on the mission. What would be, Andrea, really important for us, and in particular for the audience, to know is not only what is coming up next, but also what happened in the past, and maybe you can update us a little bit on well, how the mission came to life.
Yeah, thanks, Marco. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for hosting us here. Rosetta, of course, is a space mission, is a scientific mission, but I think in the end there's been much more than that. I think it can be an example for many other things. You might have seen on one of these slides going through is a scanned copy of minutes of meeting that had been written in May '85. So a few years ago, it was 30 years ago. This was the time when our scientists, when I say our, is European, or there were Americans as well involved, decided that they wanted to have a cometary mission, a mission flying to a comet. At that time, they wanted actually to fly to a comet, grab a sample, and bring it back to Earth. Turned out not to be possible. It's something that started 30 years ago. ESA was pretty famous in the space world for having implemented the Giotto mission that flew to Comet Halley in '86. Well, this resolution of the scientists wanted to go to a cometary mission, another cometary mission, was done before Giotto was even launched in '85. I think this tells us many, many things in nowadays world where everything is so fast, everything happens so quickly, we want everything attached to our mobile in our pocket. Some people in '85 dreamt of a mission that would go to a comet. They didn't have the technology. They hadn't the faintest idea to which comet to go. This tells us many, many things. Scientists are like children, they dream. And we need this kind of vision, these dreams to go ahead. Rosetta was something like this. It took 10 years for the European Space Agency to convince itself that was doable. Middle of the 90s, we started implementation of the mission itself. Took another 10 years to develop the mission itself, to build the spacecraft, to conceive in detail the mission. And then another 10 years, we launched the mission in the middle of last decade, and another 10 years to reach the comet. So it took 10 years to get there. Now I think it will take more than 10 years to exploit all the data we are collecting with the mission. This is the highest view I can give of the Rosetta mission. Now we can maybe during the talk we can go more in the details of what we have been doing in the past years mainly and what we will be doing in the coming months.
And Andrea, could you maybe outline a bit your specific role in the mission? I announced you as the flight director, but I think you have had and still have different tasks with regard to the mission.
Yeah, okay, my current role, I don't do anything for Rosetta anymore. But I started working on Rosetta end of '96, beginning of '97, so it's a few years ago. I was still working in Italy for a private company. I started working on Philae, on the lander. Then in '99 moved to ESA, at the Space Operations Center for ESA, as a spacecraft operations engineer for Rosetta. Then I continued my career in this environment. We launched Rosetta, spent a couple of years working for the Venus Express mission. Once Venus Express was safely in orbit around Venus, orbiting the planet in routine operations, then I moved back to Rosetta as a spacecraft operations manager. And okay, last year I've acted as a flight director for the mission itself. So I think not only my professional career, but even my life and my private life is very linked to the Rosetta mission.
Is it, by the way, true that on one of these, how may I call them, the central days, the hot phase of the mission, that, I mean, the morning after the landing, you rode your bicycle to ESOC, and somebody was pointing with the finger at you and he said, hey, look, isn't that the Rosetta guy?
Yeah, it's true, it's true. So he was raising his thumb saying, very well done.
But I mean, this is referring to the central role you played with the mission. We see you on many of these photos, which are rotating in the background. Maybe could you give us an update, and we will later come back to the situation in the Lander Control Center on, I mean, we see you, your deputy flight director, lots of other people from the mission team, we see them watching the screens. What happened on those screens?
Well, on those screens is where we get numbers coming down from the spacecraft. It's the spacecraft that is talking to us. This is what we call control system.
Yeah, telemetry.
Pardon?
This is what you call telemetry data.
Telemetry, yes. This is telemetry data. It's the spacecraft that is talking to us. It's the system we use to talk to the spacecraft and to listen to it. So we are receiving data. Fortunately, for this type of mission, we have the propagation delay, the distances we are talking about. In that case of the landing, we were at 500 million kilometers away from the Earth, so the signal travels for half an hour before it gets to the Earth. And the data flow is very limited. It's not the data stream we receive on our mobile. It's totally different. It's much lower bit rate. You get very few data, so it's not so easy to interpret all what was happening. So we were waiting for an indication that something had happened and was positive, was the landing. So we saw this signal. It was obviously difficult to interpret because we thought that we had landed and anchored on the surface of the comet, and as we've seen, as we know, this was not the case. So.
Yeah, and I think what the audience watching the live stream could realize that by intention we kept sort of the communication channels open. So the mics were open most of the time. The camera was on that team. So what the audience could witness is that there were like I would call it periods of uncertainty. Same as with the wake up. So I mean, how exactly? When was that very moment that you guys noticed? Okay, it has landed. So what was there like? We saw like a larger spike or something like that.
Well, first I would like to say that for who speaks Italian and understands Italian, the channels were a bit too open if they've heard me when we landed. But
well, this is part of transparency.
This shows that we were not paying attention to this.
Which is good.
I think people will forgive me for this. Yeah, we were waiting for a signal. It was not obvious what kind of signal we would expect for the landing itself. As I said, the telemetry rate, the frequency at which we were receiving data was every 4 minutes, the lander was sending us a chunk of data. So it's not easy to interpret this, but more or less exactly at the time we had predicted, we saw something changing in the radio link between Philae and Rosetta. And this for us was the signal that the lander had touched the surface. Of course, we interpret this as a safe touchdown. Then we started looking at detailed data. But as I said, they were coming very slowly. So in that case, we were looking for some data. It was not like the hibernation exit. The hibernation exit there was really waiting for a spike.
Okay. Koen will shortly update us a bit more on the lander itself. Maybe one last question to you, Andrea, for this very moment. Can you give us a quick outlook on what's happening next? Because this is mainly on the orbiter, which is, the exact term is perihelion. And what is this and what's going to happen in the future?
So perihelion is the closest point of the orbit of the comet to the sun. So it's when the comet is closest to the sun. Many people interpret this as the comet being extremely close to the sun, having the risk to fall into the sun. This is not the case. The closest point of this orbit is farther away than what we are currently from the sun. So the orbit of the comet is bigger than the one of the Earth. This danger doesn't exist. Rosetta is still in proximity of the comet, I would say relatively proximity. The comet is becoming more and more active, is getting closer to the sun, is warming up, is throwing out more and more material. It's fundamentally gas, is ice that is sublimating. This is like wind, but there are dust particles as well flying out of the comet. And these are creating some issues right now. Our star sensors that recognize star patterns to know how Rosetta is oriented in space is being sometimes fooled by these dust particles, so we have to step away. We are now going a bit farther away from the comet. We'll try to stay as close as possible, but most likely in the coming 2 or 3 months when we approach this perihelion, the comet will be so active that we'll have to go a bit farther out. We are now currently a bit more than 100 kilometers distance from the nucleus of the comet.
There's even an assumption that the comet might break apart, but this is more up to the scientists, I guess?
Yes, I hope on one side, I hope it doesn't happen because it would create significant problems in operating the spacecraft. On the other side, I would say scientifically and emotionally as well, this would be fantastic. Maybe we discover something new. So there is a crack. If you look carefully at the comet in between the two lobes, there's something that looks like a crack. So who knows?
Okay, now let's focus a bit more on the lander. Koen, you are the Philae lander technical manager. We can see on this very picture Stefan Ulametz, who is the Philae project lead. So he's your boss in principle. He's from DLR Cologne as well. And maybe, I mean, not sure how much in detail you know the mission. The mission is a super complex international endeavor. You might have realized that even NASA is involved. It is an ESA mission, but there is, well, many dozens of really important partners. One very important partner is DLR. In fact, can you correct me later if I'm wrong? But I think sort of the father, the guy who initiated the lander, who had the idea for adding a comet lander to this very mission, he was based at DLR at the time, and also DLR has kind of a historic role in the mission. Because the lander control center was conceived and was in place for a long time already at DLR. So actually what happened at this central moment in time of the mission is the full focus was on Germany, so to say, on Darmstadt. ESOC's control center in Darmstadt, plus the so-called LCC, the lander control center in Cologne, in beautiful Köln-Porz-Warnheide. Don't laugh, it's where I grew up. But anyway. But Koen, I mean, I would be very interested in the audience, I guess, too, in your role. And if you could describe, I mean, what happened in this very moment at the LCC?
Yeah. So as you're saying, DLR is, let's say, leading a consortium of different national agencies that built and operated Philae. Rosetta is a European agency mission. And many years ago, during the design, it was decided to put on a lander, and this was funded by different national agencies. For example, Germany, France, Italy, amongst other countries, played a primary role, and Germany, as the biggest participant, got the, let's say, the honor to manage and operate it. So what we are doing at the Land and Control Center in Cologne is, let's say, coordinating the operations, the system engineering, and everything which is necessary to, for example, to land on this comet. This, of course, goes in close operation with Andrea and his team, in particular in the years building up to this landing, because there are a lot of things that you have to work out and understand. And we have the expertise of the lander itself and how we need to be put, let's say, separated from Rosetta, etc., and what kind of requirements we have. But of course, we cannot do that ourselves, so we have to then explain it to Andrea's team and ask them, okay, we need to be in this position or with this velocity, etc. So there's a very strong collaboration with this. As you mentioned, even NASA is not involved directly in Philae, but on the Rosetta side, there are instruments operated by United States organizations. So Rosetta and Philae are truly European or international projects. What we did during the landing in the control center, so most of the images you see is the control center in Darmstadt with Andrea, but we had, let's say, an equivalent control center in Cologne.
Yeah, we have some photos. They are rotating. We can see even you and the team.
Okay. Yeah. So this is where myself I was with my team, and we were looking at the same data as they were looking in Darmstadt. And we were, of course, also waiting for this touchdown signal. And you have your timeline, you know exactly what is supposed to happen. There are some uncertainties about when Philae is actually going to touch down. But then, as Andrea said, exactly at the moment you were expecting it, you see signals changing, and then there was just a lot of information coming suddenly, like events, the onboard computer saying we touched down. But there were also some information that was leading to some confusion on our side, saying, okay, we touched down, this we can see, but everything doesn't look perfect. This was also very interesting. As Andrea said, there were cameras, everything was live streamed. Karin and Emily were, for example,
millions of viewers. Yeah,
exactly. Feeding this also into Twitter, into all the social media.
Here we have the LCC.
Exactly. Yes.
You will explain later to us who that is. I have two very important questions for you. I mean, how in the end did you arrive in interpreting this sort of disturbing data you received? So what in the end led you guys to the conclusion that the lander was bouncing? So I'm in particular interested in how you came to that conclusion. Second question, which I would like you to refer to after that, is how you as the lander technical manager, how do you sort of anticipate the technology that was necessary for the landing, because you landed with a technology and computer systems that were like 10 years old or even more. But that's the first, please tell us about the bouncing.
Okay, so what the lander, the computer can monitor is, when it impacts a surface, the comet in this case. So there were sensors monitoring if there would be vibrations and if there would be, let's say, an impact on the comet. And this for the onboard computer meant, okay, I've touched the comet, I landed. Now I start with the program sequence, shooting the harpoons, switching on the thruster, everything to keep me on this place where I touched down. So what we saw is, we saw this event, the onboard computer saying, okay, I got the signal that I touched down, now I switch on my thruster, I shoot the harpoons, and I start doing the first scientific measurements on the comet. So one of the first activities that was done was to take an image of the place where we landed. And we got all this data. So we saw the information from the computer saying, okay, I shot the harpoons, and but at the same time we also got, let's say, the information that there's like a check. One thing is you shoot the harpoon, and another thing is a check if the harpoon actually was shot. And we saw that this was not the case. So the command, let's say, was sent, but we didn't got the confirmation. And one of the, let's say, the primary points that made us very worried was that during the descent, we saw a rotation of Philae. So on the solar panels, which are all around Philae, you could see sequentially that they were illuminated by the sun and then in the darkness. And this was planned. But after the touchdown signal, in the minutes afterwards, we could still see this rotation. So we could still see that Philae was rotating. So the first thought was, okay, it could be that we're on the surface and we're still moving a bit. But with time going by every minute, we didn't see any change in this. So this could only mean that we were going back into space, because the movement was stable. But at the time, nobody could tell us that 2 hours later we were going to land again. So this was a very critical time for us, because with all the information we were getting, we knew that we were bouncing, but we didn't know if we were going to land again. It could have happened that we bounced back into deep space and everything would have been over.
It was depicted in the video as well, yeah.
Exactly. And fortunately enough, we kept the link between Rosetta and Philae. It wasn't as stable as beforehand, but there was still a link. And two things could have occurred. We could have either lost the link, and then we would have had any information anymore, or we could have seen through the link that the rotation stopped. And fortunately enough, after 2 hours, we suddenly saw a drop. You know, we saw no rotation anymore, so this could only have meant that we landed finally.
I just want to say that telemetry was flowing slowly. They were seeing these things, but they were not telling us. We couldn't see this in Darmstadt. So in Darmstadt, we were suffering. We had all the cameras, and we hadn't the faintest idea what was going on. They knew it, but they didn't tell us. It took them a while to...
That was the punishment for having all the cameras in Darmstadt.
Okay, and speaking about technology, I heard, maybe you can correct me if that is wrong information, that there is a 486 processor working on board the Philae lander. Is that correct?
Yes, so Philae was designed and built in the late 90s. So all the hardware, for example, is very old, non-comparable. Like a modern mobile phone has much more capacity than our Philae lander. But let's say it was... yeah, this is one of the problems that we have to deal with.
Okay, and when I still worked in Cologne, what I found really exciting that whenever I visited you guys, I saw the programmers, the coders, and they were constantly updating the software with the sort of, what is it called, the ground model. Yeah. And that means software has been adapted over a decade to fit the requirements for the mission, for the landing. And of course, these guys, they were programming the 486, which, and I think at some point, and it's similar to like a space shuttle or other spacecraft, you would fear that the company who produces the processors that they run out of maybe replacement models or stuff like that. So I mean, what I'm trying to say is it is really fascinating that we do such a groundbreaking mission with hardware that is, I mean, as you pointed out, Andrea, the conception was the decision in the 80s, conception 90s, launch in 2004. I mean, it's just amazing, I would say.
The onboard computer of Rosetta, the mother spacecraft, you take the computer of Philae, 486, you remove the 4, and you have the onboard computer of Rosetta. It's like a PC of late 80s. The RAM of your mobile is 1 gigabyte, maybe, or even more. The RAM of Rosetta onboard computer is 1 megabyte. And we can use only half of it, because otherwise the CPU becomes too slow. So this is what is flying.
Okay, speaking about not just social media, but communication in general, Koen, I hope you let me share one more anecdote, and you have to prove if it's true or not. There was a moment, sometime around the landing, where you were, I mean, you have been in charge of tweeting Philae 2014. for a while as well, until you let us as the communication department put our fingers on it, or Philae itself. But there was a moment where, I mean, more or less officially, Karin was in charge, but you were so excited that you logged into to Twitter and you tweeted yourself?
That's correct, yes. So during the years up to the landing, I did it myself. Of course, during the week of the landing, I was too busy with my engineering task to take this, to do this. So there was, of course, this, and also in the weeks up to that, it was coordinated by Karin. But on the Friday evening, when we had the communication with Philae, and we saw that the batteries were depleting, and we knew this was going to be the last communication link for myself as an engineer. My job was done at that point. I could just, let's say, lean back and just watch and enjoy. And I saw that on Rosetta's side there were tweets coming in, and I was in contact with Karin, but I knew that she was not with me there. So we agreed that I would simply start tweeting everything, let's say the emotions as they would come in, and as in a sort of a live stream. And that was that was true.
So was it coordinated, Karin?
Yes, always, everything. It would have been a bit difficult because I wasn't at the control center anymore. I had already gone back to where I live, to Holland. Yeah. So it would have been a lot slower if he'd had to tell me what was happening at the time. Twitter is about live. And Philae is an engineer on the surface. He has to be telling the public what he's doing.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing this anecdote with us. So, I'd like to talk about the overall communication, particularly the digital communication of the mission. We saw, I mean, we see the slides rotating in the background. What the two of you did, Emily and Karin, it was exceptional in a way, at least the way I perceived it. It has never before, and even there were a lot of people commenting on it, that two spacecraft did a conversation, actually. And by this very conversation, they conveyed really complex space science, space engineering, space flight matters to a larger public. Could you maybe explain not only this, but also, I mean, the overall idea of communication in hopefully ways which were a bit different than the normal ones, on how that worked?
Yeah, so aside from actually having the live stream direct into the control centers so we could share the true emotions of what was happening, we were looking at other ways in which we could effectively humanize the mission and allow people to make connections with the mission to their everyday lives. So around the wake-up in January 2014, so the spacecraft had been in hibernation for 31 months, we ran a campaign called Wake Up Rosetta. So we asked people to think about how they wake up in the morning, something that we all do every day, and maybe if we've enjoyed some beers with our friends at Republica the night before, we need some extra coffees in the morning to get going. So we kind of wanted people to relate how they wake up in the morning to how the spacecraft kind of might be feeling. So that was a video contest that we ran where we invited people to submit their videos to us shouting, "Wake up, Rosetta." And then kind of on a similar theme, focusing this time on the arrival of the spacecraft at the comet in August, we asked people to think about their long journeys and, how you might be feeling, are we there yet? So we kind of portrayed this in not only with a photo contest, but also with the conversations between Rosetta and Philae. And Philae would occasionally ask Rosetta, Rosetta, are we there yet? And Rosetta would be like, no, I have to check out the comet and make sure there's somewhere safe for you to land. So kind of things that you might have on a conversation and a long journey as well.
If I may interrupt you, what we can see on one of the photos is you were actually during the wake-up. You were in the control center, in the control room, main control room, next to Andrea. So you got the information that we had a successful wake-up from hibernation directly, firsthand.
Yeah, so one of the things that we were doing kind of very early on to build up momentum for the rest of the year is to use the Twitter account basically in as real time as possible with what was happening operationally. So prior to the wake-up, the Twitter account was also sleeping. And the only way that you would find out online, aside from watching the live stream, would be seeing if the Twitter account would wake up. And for that, I needed like direct, official, immediate confirmation, not with me watching the live stream interpreting.
So you had to be really convincing to those control center guys,
yeah,
or
did
they?
I think there was some convincing needed. And please, he doesn't have the microphone.
Well, if you want to call it convincing, that's fine. They force us to accept Emily in the control room. No, I'm joking.
But by the end, I think you and Paolo were asking me, you know, how the Wake Up Rosetta hashtag was doing and how many followers there were. So Twitter converts at the end of it.
Would you say that? I mean, not only after the wake up and in the phase of landing, would you say that Twitter was one of the main platforms, not just with regard to the conversation, but overall? How important were the other channels?
I think all channels are important for different audiences and different reasons, and depending on how you like to follow a mission. So the Twitter accounts are probably the most high-profile ones because they're the kind of more immediate, quick updates, and also like the conversations with File as well. But we also have the Facebook channel, we have Instagram, and we have the blog as well. So the blog is really the source of kind of more in-depth reports of status and missions and things.
So actually, we at ESA and DLR, we have not been the inventors of first-person tweeting. I guess that has been sort of invented at NASA JPL with the very first Mars rovers. I mean, Karin, maybe you can tell us. I mean, by the way, maybe you can enlighten us if the spacecraft really tweet by themselves, or how? I mean, how else would they be tweeting in first person? Okay, I'm joking, but in the end, it was not all on the fly, I guess. There was some conception behind. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the conversations between Rosetta and I were discussed beforehand. We knew the events, talking with the scientists. I was always in contact with the Lander Control Center, so I had the timeline of everything that was going to be happening. We discussed beforehand, more or less, an idea of what we wanted to convey to the public and the story we wanted to tell, but we had to improvise because, of course, it's a mission of a lot of unknowns when you're tweeting live during landing, for example. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that worked for Rosetta and I is it was real. File and Rosetta communicate, the two robots do, and so were we. We were communicating, so I think it was...
But how could you anticipate to break people's heart, actually? Because this is what the headlines and also what the comments on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere else showed. I mean, that conveyed so much feeling. Well, how could you conceive that?
We had no idea that would happen. I think it was at some point when people were concerned for File's life ending that we devised a nice, especially the last conversation, where File will continue his life. We had no idea the impact it would have. We still get messages asking File to wake up. So Rosetta gets messages asking her, is File awake?
Rosetta can be announcing like the coolest science discovery or the coolest photo ever, and the first comment is always, yeah, but what about File? Is it awake yet?
So that means, of course, File's batteries are depleted, so he can't tweet. She? Is it a he or she, by the way?
A he. We
okay,
consider
both?
him a he.
Okay, both, or I mean,
no,
or
Rosetta's a she.
Ah, okay, I see. So, and the concept is the one of an older sister and a younger brother, or something.
For example, yeah.
They're buddies. Yeah, so we decided because we tried to make File talk in first person and really tell the events that were happening. That when his batteries depleted and he went to sleep, he wouldn't say anything until he wakes up, unless he was sleep talking. But.
So, and what's the history behind? I know that the File 2014 account, it had like numerous operators. So at some point somebody began tweeting on that very account, and apparently, as far as I remember, in first person. But how did it come to you finally?
Well, it started in 2010, and the first tweet was "Hello World." Surprisingly.
Okay.
Yeah, which is similar to a Rosetta tweet. And then years later, when Koen began, and maybe he can elaborate a bit more about this, so he started working on the account, and I only got hold of it when the person in charge, which was you as well, left. And it was me together with the whole cross-media team at DLR. In meetings, of course, with the Lander Control Center, we devised what the account would be
so former colleague started in 2010, but when he left, me as the, let's say, the most, the youngest or the modernist colleague in our, let's say, a bit older team, I got the honor to continue it. And I think one thing I would like to point out is, for example, in the very beginning, my department head was not a big fan of social media. In fact, he was not very happy about this Twitter account. He didn't see the purpose of it. He was very skeptical towards it. This went even up to the week before the landing. We had some, at some point when, let's say, the discussions became a bit more critical. How do we tweet about the landing, etc.? He was in error as well. He was never really convinced. And the Friday evening, when, let's say, Philly's battery started to die, he came to me and he confessed that this week changed him into a fan of social media, of Twitter, because all the information that was tweeted was correct. It was not just random facts, but it was of not just some random information, but was really valuable information in a very concise manner, as you have to do with Twitter. And this really opened his eyes towards social media. And this I found one of a very nice thing that actually, through what we did, or what Karin and Emily did, or the whole PR team, is that you can even, you can convince people that are very reluctant against this kind of...
Good job, I would say. There's one more question I would like to ask, in particular, Emily and then Karin, before we move on to, we hope you have some questions, by the way. And I would like to focus for a moment on the fact that Karin and Emily, I mean, we have with Koen and Andrea, we have two engineers on stage here, but the two of you are not only science communicators, but you are scientists, at least in your former life, before you became science communicators. And maybe as you are the only real scientists on stage, no. But can you give us an outlook on a quick recap on the scientific achievements of Rosetta and Philae already, and what will happen in the near future? Because you're on, it's at your fingertips, I guess, as the main blogger.
Yeah, it's a real privilege to be in such close contact with all the scientists that are working on Rosetta. Of course, we've spoken a lot about landing, but Rosetta, the orbiter, is following the comet kind of long term for the next year, seeing how it changes over time and how its activity develops. For example, you've seen some pictures already of the very sort of tenuous atmosphere or coma of dust and gas that leaves the comet. And probably you're used to seeing pictures of comets from the ground with beautiful long tails. And what Rosetta's doing is finding out really how this is generated at the source. Of course, Rosetta is also answering some pretty big questions as well about the origin of the solar system and what are the chances of comets bringing water to Earth, for example. And already one of the big discoveries of Rosetta is that 67P has a kind of a different flavor of water to Earth's. Is finding out things like the nucleus isn't magnetized, for example. Again, this has implications for how the solar system evolved. Other big questions, is the comet made of two comets, or is it one comet eroding away? I mean, these are questions still which the scientists are working really hard on. So there's loads of great science to come, and especially as we head towards perihelion in a couple of months' time, we'll really see how things are changing.
Thank you. Karin, if the lander should wake up again, I mean, it already did a lot of science during its active phase. When it should wake up again, are we expect to get a bit more measurements and then scientific results?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on the amount of sunlight that it's getting and the instruments that are actually functioning. I mean, Koen knows a lot more about this than I do, but hopefully, yes. I mean, if it wakes up and all of those systems are working, it should be sending data back. Very exciting data from the surface of the comet, which has never been done before, except just one time.
Okay, there was something else you wanted to say?
I was going to say Emily kind of covered all the science stuff, but I did want to say that for the science community, I think it's important to show the public that we're accessible and transparent. And I think doing this social media, just this mission, streaming it live, was a way of showing the public this is what we do. It's not easy, and things might go wrong. There's a lot of unknowns, but we want you to know about it and connect with it. So.
Okay, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. Matthias, are we going to take some questions now?
Yeah, of course. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to come to you with the microphone. And then, okay, we start out here.
Hello. I was thinking, this is a question for the social media team. Did you consider other strategies than humanizing Rosetta and Philae?
Other than humanizing them, or well, just kind of thinking of how to connect with the public. I already discussed. One thing we didn't talk about was Ambition, the film. This was kind of another unique thing that ESA did. I don't know if anyone has seen it here, but it's a short sci-fi kind of film that talks about Rosetta in the past tense, so it's set in the future, and like how important things like human characteristics like well, ambition, curiosity, stubbornness to succeed, kind of really drive your kind of human nature to want to understand the science of where we came from. So in terms of the strategy for that, again, this was released onto YouTube as a trailer without any connection to ESA, so targeting completely different audiences, even away from ESA. And then in the end, the reveal was made, and the connection between, this isn't science fiction, it's actually science fact. And again, kind of new audiences were achieved in that way as well.
And I would say we also have social media channels at DLR, and so does ESA, has plenty of other social media channels where we could communicate what was happening with Philae, with Rosetta at the time, in third person. This is what's going on. We have our classical channels, the press portal, the web portal, and this was just another way of connecting, maybe with just a much wider audience. I mean, I know parents showing their children what we were saying, making it a story being told live. It was just a different way, and making it human just makes people relate to it.
Okay, we have another question over here and one in the back, just to make sure that I saw you.
Okay, at first I just wanted to say thank you for your hard work. I had the impression that the Rosetta mission and the social media coverage was a very groundbreaking thing, and for the first time I really thought the moon landing must have felt likewise. The whole humankind, or lots and lots of humans, are suddenly interested in science and suddenly have, well, it's just a very nice thing to see that the internet is used for very cool things, not for trolls and shitstorms and everything but science, and for cool science. My question is if you have any impression on how the reception of the science stuff the ESA does has changed after Rosetta. Is there any long-lasting improvement or any long-lasting interest which peaked after Rosetta? Or is it more like it was a very one-time thing, and now it's, well, I'm a bit nervous, sorry. But I just wonder if those social media experience and those social media achievements you did have any long-lasting effect on science education and science interest.
Well, at the moment, I mean, we saw obviously big peaks in traffic around the key events, but there is a long-lasting legacy even in the 6 months now since Comet landing. So like the Twitter accounts, not just ESA Rosetta and not just Philae, but at least from my experience of the other ESA channels, they all saw quite a dramatic increase in followers, and they've stayed. And I think a lot of people with Rosetta, they then discovered the European Space Agency for the first time. And so, maybe they're now attracted to all the other missions, and not just comets as well. So I think in terms of the knock-on effect for science education, we'll have to maybe wait a few years' time to see the next generation of scientists and see if they say they were inspired by Rosetta or, the cartoon that they watched when they were 5, for example.
Well, I would say for DLR it's likewise. We do get a lot of questions because they want the lander to start doing science again. And I don't think that's ever happened before. People just asking, when are you going to do this? What's going to happen now? Tell us more. So it's definitely had a really positive impact.
Yep. First of all, I'd like to say thank you as well. I was really glued to the screen that day, like for hours on end. So excellent job. And the question is about the impact of the PR work, like the Kardashian angle. So can you share a couple of numbers, like the social reach, the kind of feedback you got? And was it unexpected? I mean, you pointed out it's a scientific mission, so it's maybe geek stuff, but in the end, millions were listening and commenting on it. And so your thoughts on that?
Okay, I may answer as the originator of that of the session's title. The thing is, I had them included in my notes here, but I do not have the numbers with me. They were in the order of magnitude of 9 digits impressions on Twitter. This is what I remember. Maybe Emily, do you have a better memory of? But I mean, what? Daniel knows it.
4.4 billion.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, 50 million live stream viewers. Daniel, who is part of the social media team as well.
50 million live stream viewers in the 24-hour period, and 1.5 billion peak concurrent in the hour of landing.
Okay, and 4.4 billion was the number of impressions on Twitter, like the timeline deliveries or something like that? Okay, so what's worth noting, I think, and that relates to your question, is we were monitoring, in particular that was my job during the landing. We were monitoring sort of the Twitter spikes, and this is where I was inspired to choose this title, because we learned that very same day. I didn't even know who Kim Kardashian is, and I'm not trying to be pretentious. Of course, as the social media coordinator, I realized, well, okay, there's another trending hashtag coming up. And there was that paper Mac, which, by the way, is blocked from the ESA internal firewall, so I couldn't access it. So, and I learned, okay, there's some celebrity, and she's running some campaign in this very day. And in the end, I had very friendly lady who is, I guess, here on Republica on this very day as well, Isabel, who works for Twitter Germany. And they, of course, helped us with the event, because also they made sure that Twitter would be stable during that, because it was expected that Rosetta would be trending. In fact, that we, according to the official Twitter statistics and the spike, you can see it on one of those rotating slides here. The Twitter Rosetta trending spike is larger, is higher than the Kardashian one. So not sure if that answers your question. Thank you. So as I pointed out in the description, an epic win for space science. I would say over the Boulevard-esque kind of news. We had that very same day. Hope that answers your question.
Hi, good morning. First, I want to thank you for your great work. It was very moving to see the comet landing presented in such a fashion. But something has been bothering me about this. The whole story is a huge success story, but did you ever conceive contingencies for the events that something went wrong in concepting the social media campaign?
I think that's part of why it was a success, is that it was risky and things could have gone wrong. But then we were sharing that human emotion, so it was live. And if, for example, the spacecraft hadn't woken up, then that would be portrayed live as well. If the comet landing didn't go quite to plan, then that was shared as well. So it was high risk, but it paid off. Maybe Andrea wants to add.
We've been brainwashed in case something had gone wrong, or what to say now. No, of course, as part of our job, operations can say as well. Of course, we foresee contingency. We share them with the colleagues of the communications team. We try to explain them exactly what can go wrong, why can go wrong, what are the timing of our recovery, of our time required to analyze what has gone wrong. And I think this was part of the success. And as Emily said, going live was unusual for me. It's not what I've done in all my career, but okay, it worked out very well. And I think if we had failed, I think we would have been, so to a certain extent, successful anyhow, because we didn't hide anything and we shared exactly what was going on. So this was the best part.
And we may say that the mission, I mean, there have been various, there could have been various contingency scenarios, and it could have begun already with the wake-up of the lender. And I was, somebody told to me, look, it is if you would park your car in a garage for 10 years and then try to restart it. So even there, I mean, there was no certainty that it would actually wake up. So, but in fact, it happens. And if I may say so, I think the overall goal was transparency and on conveying that space is a risky business, is a risky matter, but it is worthwhile.
Just to add one more thing, I mean, we tried to manage expectations as well with our PR activities. So, you know, we portrayed that it was a risky business. We weren't saying, yeah, for sure it's going to work. We were saying, you know, these are the risks, these are the things that can go wrong, but we're trying, and yeah, join with us and see what happens.
We had also a strategy that we communicated properly, was that the scientific objectives of the Rosetta mission were achieved at 80% in terms of intrinsic scientific objectives by the orbiter itself. Because the orbiter arrives, does the rendezvous with the comet and follows the comet for 1 year at a distance that reaches even 6 kilometers from the comet. And then all the observations, the 10 or 11 instruments on the orbiter that are still working are doing the work. And the risk was something that we experienced some years before when we launched Mars Express. Mars Express is a mission that is still orbiting around Mars and had also a lander, Beagle 2. And of course, the question is this: when you have a lander, all of a sudden the attention goes to the lander, and it gives the impression to people that the mission is only the lander, and the lander is only the cherry on the cake. And then, of course, this was the logic that we had to play, of course, giving the importance to the different parts, not playing too much this thing, but getting that message, that in case this crazy thing of a lander that lands there doesn't work because it's crazy, because we are Europeans, we are crazy. And you have seen the NASA guy there in the intervention. The guy was impressed at ESOC. He said, look, you are great. You are great. It's crazy what you do. And I think this is also part of our personality. We are diverse: Italian, Italo-German, Dutch, Spanish. This is a source of major craziness in the positive sense. And this was we were convinced that we had to be open, because in fact this idea of the cherry on the cake was also strong. And it's important to be crazy and to give to our... And when you see, I don't know if you have retained there, when you see the tweets of people like the President of France, Hollande, and Renzi, and Cameron, etc., all of them coinciding on saying, look, this is the example of an Europe that works. When these guys realize that, okay, we are in the good path.
Okay, we have Marco.
Thank you. Sorry, Matthias.
I'm here. I'm over
shall
here.
I introduce Fernando? He's the head of communication and who's the enabler behind all this in terms of communication. Sorry, Matthias.
No problem. Just saying, we ran out of time, but we still have 2 questions. So I would like to take these 2 questions just to make sure that you answer them briefly, please. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I also was glued to the screens and everything, and I loved it. And I think you've done a really, really amazing job in science communication. But I was wondering, in the mainstream media, how was the interest there? And would it be possible, in theory, if you can put one of your own persons for communications into the control center, to pick one independent journalist to put there and to report from there?
Difficult question.
Okay, we did for the hibernation exit. Emily was in the control room, so this was we did. You can imagine that the control room is one of the most appealing places to be during one of these events, and with any kind of request coming to be in the control room. The control room, we had to host several people, so we couldn't fit many more people. I know the colleagues from NASA, for example, they have a permanent communications team position in the main control room, and it's something that we are, I think we are slowly experimenting and learning at the European Space Agency as well, and I guess will come. I know Daniel as well is also pushing for it, so we are not necessarily against it in the control room.
Okay, also from me, congratulations to this masterpiece of science communication, in my opinion. I just had one more thought of this risk of making the communication so personal. I had the chance before the landing on the event of Comet Arrival to talk to one of those guys who made this comic film, this super emotional thing, to me at least. And he also was really afraid that in case of mission failure, that yeah, it's so emotionally tied to those little cute boxes that are also super appealing to kids. It's actually a kids film that moves us grown-ups too, of course. And he was really afraid that in case of a mission failure, how they should be able to tell the kids that something happened, and at least to make this tweak of, oh, I'm a bit tired and I have to go to sleep now. That was a super smart move to make it to an emotional, nice end or something like this. So I think that was quite a great job. Thanks for that.
Thank you. And yeah, well, it has to wake up for the sake of the cartoon, really. So.
Okay, thank you very much, you guys, for a great insight into a huge scientific experiment.